Good morning, everybody. I have a few more people coming in and taking their seats, but my name is Rafael Sestero. I'm the Chief Executive Officer of the Community Preservation Corporation, but that's not why I'm here today. Thank you. I'm here today because I'm a proud member, a board member of the Center for an Urban Future, and want to thank you all for being here today, and thanks to the many people also watching via the live stream. The Center for Urban Future is a think tank focused on creating a stronger and more equitable economy in New York City and expanding economic opportunity for all New Yorkers. But one of the best things about the Center for Urban Future is that the reports don't just sit on shelves. CUF's research consistently generates a lot of attention, helping to raise the viability of issues, ideas, and opportunities that otherwise float under the radar of policymakers. Even more importantly, CUF's reports regularly serve as a catalyst for new policies and investments. It's why Crain's recently published a cover story about CUF titled "The Think Tank That's Quietly Influencing New York City's Top Officials." In my work at CPC, I spend a lot of time trying to address the city's affordability crisis by financing the affordable housing that's so needed and such a big part of keeping costs down for New Yorkers. But my colleagues and I know that solving the city's affordability challenges requires more than just one solution or one program. As CUF has been saying, New York needs a plan for the other side of the affordability equation. Strategies for boosting incomes, building wealth, increasing homeownership, and expanding pathways to the middle class, so that more New Yorkers can build the financial assets needed to live in this high-cost city. Today's event will delve into these issues with a focus on generating actionable ideas for city and state leaders to address this side of the affordability crisis. And I'd like to thank all the speakers, including the 3 city council members who will be on our first panel, Eric Dinowitz, Rita Joseph, and Pierina Sanchez. And also a big thank you to Wells Fargo for making this event possible today. I'm excited to say that this will be the first in a series of policy forums between CUF and Wells Fargo on critical opportunities to strengthen the city and expand financial opportunity. So now, let's get started. Please join me in welcoming CUF's Executive Director, Jonathan Bowles.
All right, Rafael Sestero, thank you. Also, a big thank you to Wells Fargo for their partnership and support. Thanks also to the many people that are here today that are working on the ground in communities across the city, helping to increase economic opportunity and expand pathways for upward mobility. I'm Jonathan Bowles, Executive Director of the Center for an Urban Future. We're here today to talk about the other side of affordability. But let me first give props to Mayor Mamdani for so powerfully putting affordability at the top of the city's agenda. It's pretty important, right? It's important because it's abundantly clear today that New York is facing an affordability crisis, one that has made it harder than ever for New Yorkers to make ends meet and which threatens the city's future competitiveness. It's also clear that a big part of the solution involves relieving pressures New Yorkers feel every day with rising rents, the staggering cost of childcare, and the high cost of so many other daily expenses, from gas bills to groceries. But lowering costs alone won't be enough to solve the affordability crisis. It's critical also to tackle the other side of affordability, boosting incomes and building wealth. Indeed, a big part of the problem as we see it is that more than 1 million working-age New Yorkers are either unemployed, underemployed, or stuck in low-wage jobs. And as one of our speakers might mention later, too few New Yorkers have the ability to save for their kids' college or their own retirement. It's not only that the rent is too damn high, it's that people's incomes and assets aren't keeping pace. Yes, increasing the minimum wage is an important step, but New York also needs more good jobs. more accessible pathways into good jobs, more support for CUNY students to succeed academically and in accessing well-paying careers, new investment that allows us to scale up the most effective workforce training programs, and more employers willing to hire CUNY students and graduates of workforce training programs. In a slowing economy where there has been a pretty steep drop in entry-level jobs, we're also going to need to bolster pathways that, at least for some, involve entrepreneurship and not just employment. And we'll have to ensure that a lot more of the city's great immigrant and minority-owned businesses are able to grow to another level so that they employ even more local residents and build wealth for their founders. And we should boost other opportunities for asset building, for saving, and for home ownership. In December, my colleague and I, Eli Dvorkin and I, authored a commentary in Vital City titled The Other Side of Affordability. In that, we put forward a handful of concrete ideas for how city leaders can achieve these broad goals, because there are concrete solutions out there. But New York needs a lot more good, actionable ideas for tackling the other side of affordability. That's why we're here today, and I'm optimistic with the great speakers we have in this lineup that we're going to hear a lot of great ideas today. So let's get on with it. Let me turn it over to CUF's really outstanding policy director, Eli Dvorkin. And if the first panel can come up on stage, that'd be great. Thank you.
We'll find you all your spots.
Right in
Good
this-
morning, everyone.
Good morning.
Let everyone get comfortable.
Brooklyn in the
So
middle
great
of
to see all of you here today, and thanks to everyone who's joining us on the live stream as well. It is such a pleasure and an honor to be here with the three of you today. I will briefly mention who's up on the stage with me. Their full bios you can read in your packets. But we're joined today, and we're so pleased to have Council Members Pirina Ana Sanchez, the Chair of the Committee on Housing and Buildings, Councilmember Rita Joseph, Chair of the Committee on Higher Education, and Councilmember Eric Dinowitz, the Chair of the Committee on Education in the New York City Council. Council members, welcome. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you.
So I feel pretty confident that in 25, 30 minutes or so with the three of you, we can solve the other side of affordability crisis. But we have to start somewhere. So
Absolutely.
I'd love to get your thoughts as a starting point on, first of all, if you support this premise that while it's absolutely right that the city is so laser focused on lowering costs, that there should be an equal focus on the other side of the equation. And if you agree, if you disagree, maybe you can keep it to yourselves. But if you do agree, I'd love to hear some of your thoughts about where you see these interconnected policy issues sitting right now in the council and the city more broadly, and help us understand, help us start to think through what should a policy agenda for the other side of affordability look like? What are the key components that we should be talking about today?
That's for all of us.
As for all of you, I see you, but your smile, Councilmember Dinowitz, makes me think we'll go to you first.
No, my smile was like I'm a little uncomfortable. I don't know who's. Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
Is this on? Okay, we don't have monitors up here, so I have no idea. Okay, let's try that again. Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
By the way, just so you know, I can tell when there are educators in the room and when there are not, because the educators say, "Good morning," and you all right? All right, good morning. All right. So yes, I agree. I remember back when I was running in 2021, we talk a lot about affordable housing, housing being affordable, very important. But even then, a lot of us were talking about, but we need to make sure it's constructed, for example, with union jobs, right, prevailing wages. And there are some bills that we've passed in the council, I'm going to let Councilmember Sanchez talk a little more about that ensure that more and more workers are getting that prevailing wage or incentivizing more of that union construction. To say we could build all the housing that we want, but it's no good if no one can afford to live in it. Of course, from my perspective, what is and has been my drive is education. And I'll give you, I guess, one example of what we've pushed in the city council over the past few years. Something I know CUF is very invested in, that's ASAP and ACE. And when I was chair, now it's chaired by Councilmember Rita Joseph, she's doing a fantastic job. And when I was chair of the Higher Education Committee, we pushed to get more investment in ASAP. And I'll explain what it is in a sec, and actually allocate specific funds in the budget for this program, which wasn't done before. ASAP is a program that has community college students, or ACE for your colleges, and says we're going to provide you wraparound supports. If you need help with textbooks, with tuition, with a MetroCard, now Omni, rest in peace MetroCard, we will help you get there. And the reason I'm bringing this up is because for every dollar that was invested in ASAP, the taxpayer gets $3 to $4 back in returns. And some of those returns are calculated based on the fact that those students who are more likely to graduate are more likely to graduate, and when they graduate are more likely to get higher paying jobs so they could afford more things. They're also paying back to the tax base more, and they are less likely, with that college degree, with less chance for college debt, to not be on government assistance. And so these are all obviously all interconnected, but that is just one of the things that we've done in the City Council to bolster that other side of affordability, uplifting New Yorkers through the ASAP and ACE program.
So I'm gonna piggyback off of you and connect it to K-12. And that's one thing I've said, New York City Public Schools and CUNY should be hand in hand. There should be a relationship because it's a handoff to opposite. So K-12 is coming to CUNY, but where's the partnership that we should have? College Now, early college program, P-Tech programs that get young people ready for career pathways. And what's interesting with the dual enrollments that I'm looking to expand, but of course I have to assess the ecosystem, is to see how many do we have. Dual enrollment, that means the child graduates with a high school diploma and an associate degree, debt-free. You set them on the pathway to career with mentorship, entrepreneurship skills, financial literacy skills, and also internship skills, building those skills and directly a pipeline into the workforce. So all of that has to be together, and New York City Public Schools have to talk to CUNY. CUNY has to talk to New York City Public Schools to make this a seamless transition into the workforce. When we talk about scaling up, this is a way. Future Ready is one of the ways, pathways. The P-Tech programs that we have, the young people are going straight into career. For example, EMT, nursing, early childhood education is one of the pathways with support. Test preps, books, Omni. I shouldn't have to worry, and $50 should not keep me out of colleges.
Yeah, I think they said it all. It's awesome to be in a space where that's what you do, right? As chair of education, as chair of higher education, this is what we focus on. This is what you focus on, right? Is how do we prepare our students for their futures, for their economic mobility? For me as a planner and somebody who grew up in the West Bronx, I think about the intersection of land use and injustice, land use and economic mobility. And so that's why for me in the West Bronx, we have this little tiny building. It's the size of 6 football fields. It's called the Kingsbridge Armory. It's been empty for 30 years. There have been 2 sort of high profile, if you're a planning nerd especially, attempts to redevelop the Armory. But when I took office in 2022, we started a new effort, right? And we started a new effort with a real focus on bringing the community in, having them have a voice. Because I have a shocker for everyone here. Nobody wants to be economically insecure. Nobody wants to depend on anyone but their own sufficiency, their own ability to earn money, right? And so it turns out that when you put that question before a community that is economically disadvantaged, that does come from a history of disinvestment and racism and everything else layered onto the barriers that face the West Bronx and the South Bronx and low-income communities in our city, it turns out they have a lot of answers. It turns out they tell you exactly how you should use a $1 billion asset. It turns out that they tell you that they want spaces to develop our young people. They want spaces to recreate. They want spaces, however, to also generate jobs that will help them launch into the future. We have a very active street vending community in the city, 23,000 strong. only about 25% of who are licensed up until, hopefully, this big reform bill that we pass, and I'll talk about later maybe if I have a chance, that is going to get folks licensed. But on Kingsbridge, in front of the Armory, is sort of like every single interview that I did about the Armory during that process was just, folks they're selling like screwdrivers and like old shoes, but like also new shoes. Like they are just entrepreneurial. And I just, I'm heartened by that, and I take that as an opportunity to uplift that immigrant communities, low-income communities, we have the grit, we have the resourcefulness, we have the fight in us. We just need to be connected to these opportunities. And so the Department of Education, the, CUNY, our institutions, and every single program, there's so many programs that we run with the intention of helping people helping New Yorkers to elevate into the middle class and beyond. All of these programs need to come together with meeting folks where they're at beyond education, right? In the land use space, in the economic development arena, in every other arena. And so I'll stop there because I can talk a lot. But very excited to be here, and thank you.
Well, thank you. Let me ask you a follow-up about that, Councilmember Sanchez, and I think you're welcome to, your colleagues are welcome to weigh in as well. So, it strikes me that we're going to need to see more, and we will see more rezonings, more land use changes in the months and years ahead, in no small part because both the mayor and the council shares a goal of building hundreds of thousands of new units of affordable housing in the city. It's not going to be possible to do that without some major land use changes. We have city-owned assets and state-owned assets that could be redeveloped for job creation, for other community uses. But in all of those processes, and we've studied some of this at the Center for an Urban Future, we've certainly seen that in general, over not just years, but many, many years, that so rarely do major land use changes or major rezonings, are they accompanied by investments in workforce development, in building pathways to opportunity, in small business development, but not never. And Kingsbridge is an example of that, a powerful example. So I'd love to ask you just to talk to us a little bit more about, very specifically, for your colleagues in the council, and maybe more broadly, so that we can go from this being done in an ad hoc or kind of one-on-one basis with a council member taking the initiative to negotiate all of these community benefits and then holding, the various parties involved accountable to meet those commitments. How can we go beyond that sort of one-off thinking and integrate those kinds of commitments and investments across the board in rezonings and land use changes? And what very specifically are those commitments that you see as building the other side of the affordability equation? Whether that's a Kingsbridge Armory example or neighborhood rezoning, what do we need to be doing more of, and how do we get there?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. I won't talk smack about anyone who is no longer in office. But who may or may not have changed some of... I thought
she was going to talk about me, so I'm like, okay, I'm still in office, I'm fine.
But who may or may not have changed some of the dynamics of the land use process in our city. So look, we have we had a lot more power before December of in terms of council members having leverage over land use decisions, right? We were, at the end of the day, we were yes or no, right? And so that empowered us as individual members, and those of us who really wanted to use that opportunity to leverage wins for our community, to like put up a big, bold, like, you're not doing this unless, right? And that's really that leverage, which we still will have to an extent, although now our borough president friends, right, given the changes, the last referendum, our borough president friends also have some leverage. We will still have that, but I think, in answer to your question, it is thinking big, right? I am lucky enough that the way that my sort of trajectory and career mapped out or planned out was I started off as a council staffer, and then I went off to grad school and was like, oh crap, there's this thing that exists called urban planning. That's really cool. I want to do that. And then I went to a think tank, right, at RPA. And then after the think tank, where I did a lot of thinking up here, I went straight into the weeds and the nuts and bolts at the mayor's office under de Blasio. And so that sort of trajectory allowed me to see, on the one hand, what are the big picture items that we want to accomplish? How much we need to build more so that we can have more housing, but not just build more. It also has to be income restricted and specific to the needs that we're seeing in the community. We also need more transit access. That kind of thinking, then zooming into, oh, the council wants to pass this bill, and is it an and or is it an or, and is it a dash or an M dash, right? So this kind of going up and down allowed me to see rezonings before my time, before Kingsbridge, from those different lenses. So I was a part of GEM, the Greater East Midtown rezoning, which was then Councilmember Garodnick. Really, there was a failed rezoning, and then he did this whole community process and had all the stakeholders, and we often called it like the storm before the calm. And then there was East Harlem, where Melissa Mark Rita was the speaker, so she has all the resources to do whatever she wanted, and so she had a rezoning in her community, and she did this pre-planning process. And there were other examples, so that when I got to be and then I was on the community board for our Jerome rezoning, having seen East Harlem and having seen Greater East Midtown, but when I got to Kingsbridge, I had all of those examples to say, no. We have to start from scratch. We have to put the question to the community, and then anything else that comes out of this process has to flow from what they've told us. And that's what they tell us. They want those investments in, they want local hire, right? And there's, but you can't do this and you can't do, and you figure it out, right? All of the roadblocks that the city, love you city, I'm a part of you now, but all of these roadblocks and legal matters that they'll put before you to say you can't preference your own community, you can't do this, you can't do that, you find a way around it because the intent is righteous. The intent is to help economically depressed communities to become more economically powerful and self-sufficient. And so these kind of investments, local hire, commitments from the developer, commitments to build new schools in the case of the Jerome rezoning where we had overcrowding, commitments to new parks because we have a highly dense community, but we don't have a lot of open space. All of these investments, being able to be a part of the conversation at that moment when we have some leverage. Mayor's super powerful. City council members, all we can do is call a press conference and kind of hope that the press comes, right? So that moment where we do have that leverage, it's really important to take advantage of.
Can I piggyback real quick? I have a project in my district it's the best kept secret in New York, and today I'm going to share it. It's called the Flatbush Caton Market, Flatbush Central. It used to be a municipal parking lot, and there were vendors, similar to you, vendors that were vending in there. They were getting tickets, they were there winter, and then finally the city got together and said, hey, let's build affordable housing, 100% affordable housing. But what we did with the vendor downstairs, we created hubs. Each of them have their own hub. They were called legacy vendors. And we didn't stop there. We said, we got to be able to bring community back. So we have a commercial kitchen. So if you're an entrepreneur, a culinary person, a caterer, you get to use it at a community rate. And we have a podcast room. We have a place where you can make T-shirts. So it's there. It's on Flatbush if you ever want to visit in Caton. It is the best kept secret in New York City. And then we do small business classes to train the next generation of entrepreneurs with a 12-week program, and you get a certificate, and it's run by this amazing woman, and it's also language access. So we remove the barriers that folks would have to face to be part of this program. And with the funding from our office and other agencies, the training for the 12-week small business incubator is free of charge. So 100% affordable housing on the top, vendor, restaurants downstairs, and you could come and get anything Caribbean, anything, dresses. I shop there all the time to support the small businesses, and they're older women, and one of the things we did, we provided them with legacy. They can pass this on to their children who want to carry on this legacy. So anybody who want to visit the Flatbush Caton Market, just call me, and you're invited.
Can I actually have a show of hands? How many of you vote in New York City? Okay, so like most of you. So I'm going to I don't gamble, so I'll make a friendly bet. I'm going to bet most of you voted for these ballot proposals in November. You voted yes on them. And who would vote no? Make it easier to build more affordable housing? But I find, Councilmember Sanchez sort of referenced this sort of charter changes, and what it means. I think it's a little problematic because it, as she said, makes it harder for us to build community. And I think for many years we've been drinking this, sort of Kool-Aid about building more housing and units. You're not ever supposed to criticize the moderator, but it's a word that triggers me. Because units mean nothing. We are not building enough 2- and 3-bedroom apartments. We are not building family-sized units. And so we could say we want to build more units, and we could build 250,000 studios, which does not house families. It does not growing couples who want a dog even. right? And we are going to fail as a city if we are not building for families. We are going to continue to lose families. There's significant outmigration of families. I think there was a Cuff report about that, right? Okay, right? In large part due to lack of housing. I think the other one was childcare, which we're working on. And so that is, we have to change the way that we are talking about building. We can't build units. We have to build different size units. We have to build for families. We have to build 2 and 3 bedroom apartments. We can't just talk about building housing. We want to build housing, but we have to talk about building community. Because when it comes down on the ground, when a new building goes up, my constituents don't say, oh, keep these people out of here. They say, I'm happy we're building housing, but where are the kids going to go to school? How is my sewer system, how is my basement going to stop getting flooded? How is that extra water not going to overflow into the Bronx River and the Harlem River? Right? How are we all going to fit on the bus? Reasonable questions that we do not answer because we have this sort of tunnel vision. And every mayoral candidate did it. Every mayor, no matter what side of the spectrum you're on, build more units. We have this tunnel vision about building units. We have to start talking about what that looks like. And I hope everyone here in this room goes off and starts talking about what the housing and what community actually looks like.
Well, Councilmember, I'm going to ask you all of you another follow-up question that I think in some ways builds on what you're getting at, but without maybe reopening the Charter Revision Commission just yet. And the reason I say this is because...
By the way, it's unpopular to say, to be against something the majority of New Yorkers voted for, but I don't care.
But I want to ask you this in part because some of the conversations we've had over the years around economic mobility come back to the idea that it's not always the case that community members, community boards, or just local residents know what are the levers, what are the options. If we want more folks in our community to not just be able to lower costs or see more affordable housing built here, but to be able to get on the path to the middle class, to be able to build family and even generational wealth, there's not always a clear sense of what should we be asking for. So I actually want to point that back to the three of you and say, what should New Yorkers be asking for? If the goal is we want our kids to have a better shot at a better life than we have today, we want to see more New Yorkers in our community be able to exit poverty and move into the middle class. We want to see more of our families be able to build wealth and retain it. What should they be asking for? And I say this not only for New Yorkers who want to know, but frankly for conversations that you all may have within your conference, within the council, and even with the mayor to say, okay, we do see the demand, the desire for more progress on the other side of affordability, but what should we be asking for?
So.
I've talked a lot, so you go.
I'll say two things, because you asked sort of two different things. You asked what are the levers. I will share a breaking news. I'm introducing a resolution today about civics education in our schools. And this deals with things like community boards, like voting, like engaging in the community. I won't go through what the resolution says, but it's about the seal of civic readiness, which is a seal on your diploma that you earn by doing different types of projects or portfolio-based assessments. And that's the second part of, I think, what we need to be asking. We need to be asking, what are our schools teaching our kids? And at the end of the day, I believe that all of that has to be rooted in good evaluation and good assessment. And I want you to think about, if you have children or you've visited a school, all the amazing things that you see schools doing. You see the STEM projects that they may be doing. They may be building robots. They have a robust financial literacy program, the debate team they could have. Maybe it's a music and art program that you've fallen in love with. And the trips that they do to all over the country, none of these things are assessed or evaluated by the Department of Education. All of the good things you see in our school, or many of the good things, are done in spite of what is being asked of them. And so, for example, a school's data will include the number of students going to college. That's great. We want a lot of kids going to college. But for some students, college isn't their path. And that's okay. But we're not measuring how many students take the civil service exam, for example. Right? If there's that cohort of students that aren't applying to college, it's not for them, but really want to just start working, we're not measuring number of students taking the civil service exam, number of students doing an apprenticeship with a union, number of students entering the military. And so if it's not being measured, then we're not incentivizing the schools to do it. And you can go down the list of things we want our schools to do. If our schools are not measured in some fashion on whether or not they have a debate program, it is just going to get done because the principal thinks it is a good program, or the superintendent happens to think that it is a good and valuable program to do. And again, in spite of what our overarching DOE system is asking our schools to do, we are having amazing things done in our school. But that is not a way to build the system. If we want more students graduating with financial literacy, we have to be going in and assessing it beyond a self-certification. New York State Ed just spoke about financial literacy. They changed their the laws to implement more financial literacy, but it's like self-certification. If we want more students to do arts education, if we want job training, if we want to make sure they're prepared, we have to start measuring or evaluating in some fashion from the top. Because once you start measuring things, then it is an incentive for our principals and our teachers and our students to engage in that type of education. And if we do that, you will see more students prepared to enter college. You will see more students prepared to enter the workforce, or prepared to know the levers of government that they can push or pull or step on, or whatever you do with a lever, to build the type of community they want to see for themselves and for their children.
So, I just wanted to say that Eric is giving you guys more work, because we pass reporting bills that ask for more data, but then it's really you guys, right, the civic community that uses that. So sign me up. Go ahead.
Right, but just to be clear, this is beyond reporting, because there's a difference between someone reporting someone to the city council or to CUF or the public, and then a superintendent, like the system itself, going, hey, like principal, I'm sitting with you, I am your boss, let's look at the elements of your school that are being, the educational programs being implemented. Gosh, you're not doing the debate program. Oh wow, you are doing the debate program. And those are the sorts of conversations and evaluations that need to happen systemically.
Principals do something called PPOs, and they are responsible for keeping in touch with communities and making sure they're engaging with the civic. But I want to circle back, Eli, to your rezoning. I was doing a rezoning, I'm doing a couple of them in my district where I engaged the community first. To ask them, there was a KFC there, sorry, anyone who represents KFC, but there was no supermarket. And so in this rezoning, in the negotiation, one of the things we asked the developer for was a supermarket, one, and there were young families there. We asked for an early childhood center. And that was one of the things that we wanted to see in the community, because when we assessed the area, and this was a walkthrough with the community, and at the time, former council member Grotnick, who was running DCP, to look at the whole landscape and where can we start to do a comprehensive rezoning, not just a piecemeal. I didn't want little housing here, I wanted a comprehensive rezoning of the area, but what community benefit we didn't have. And believe it or not, it was a supermarket with fresh food and fresh fruits. And the kids came to city council to testify, all I see, council member, are delis on every corner. We don't see supermarkets. And the young families, and that's what I was saying to New York City Public Schools in the hearing yesterday. Where are you getting your data to build early childhood seats? Are you randomly figuring it out? Are you doing essays? Are you meeting folks where they are to capture that data? And that data is going to drive your policy. And it's not going to be, I'm just building it to build it, but it's really going to be a community benefit. So that's one of the rezoning that I'm doing, to add a supermarket, to get rid of the KFC and add an early childhood. And then another benefit I'm bringing in is a new high school with one of the new development. The current high school has no windows. When I did a tour, I was like, oh, what are we doing? And so that's one of the benefits to bring in a new high school. And this is a top-notch high school, and they have no windows, no music, and I want state-of-the-art for our young people and a pathway for them. So that when we talk about rezoning, those are the ways I approach the negotiation with the developers.
Yeah. I would add to the question of what should we be asking for in our communities. This is the panel about the other side of affordability, but I do just want to underscore that the importance of a stable home does help with the other side of affordability, right? Because it is reduced stress. It is an ability to focus on your growth and your family's growth. So I don't want to cut that out of the conversation. But then, so three things. That number two is New York City is a massive employer. We have close to 400,000 jobs in the city of New York. And across our agencies, I was looking at some of the hearing testimonies. We just had 35 hearings a couple weeks ago in the span of like a week. It was great. It was wonderful. But you learn a lot, and also you see themes that are just so incredibly important. We have a 15% vacancy rate across agencies. But when you zoom into agencies that focus on economic opportunity, stability, those aspects that would help us to get at the most vulnerable communities in the city, they have the highest vacancy rates. So that you're talking about 18 to 25%. And then when you zoom into certain functions, like in the Human Resources Administration that administers SNAP and food benefits and housing, emergency housing security, like one-shot deals, then you're talking about those 20% vacancy rate numbers. So one, that really hurts our community's abilities to get back on their feet. But two, it's just a massive job opportunity, like a jobs program opportunity for New Yorkers. And so the question becomes, how many of our students are taking the civil service exam? How many of, what are the barriers, right? Because it's not like people aren't applying for these jobs. You talk to the commissioners and they're like, oh, well, we have the EMS vacancy rate is super high and there's a wage problem there and an inequality problem there. But when you look at what the commissioner said about why we have such a high vacancy rate among EMS, what she said was that we're not getting qualified applicants. And so, almost anything is a natural experiment in New York City because of our size, but we should really be using our size to think about and learn and understand what is it about our population that isn't leading to our population being also our job market, our employees.
Well, I love that point, Councilmember, and it really strikes me that, in this moment where our recent research has shown the number of entry-level jobs in New York City has plummeted 37% over the past 3 years. And paid internships in New York City, the number of postings has plunged by a similar amount since 2019. And while government can't absorb all of that demand, our research suggests that government can help, including just by offering more internships to CUNY students, for example. I wanted to ask you all maybe one last question. I think we have just 1 minute left. For those of you who want to jump in with a quick answer, if there's something else that we haven't yet talked about just in this panel today that you'd like to go to the mayor, go to the speaker and say, here's one concrete thing, one thing that we haven't yet talked about, whether it's building assets, whether it's home ownership, whether it's pathways to the middle class, that you think deserves to be top of the list or higher on the list, what's that one thing?
I have gone to them and I've told them that this is what they need to be focusing on, but I'm the daughter and granddaughter of street vendors. Workers that work in delivery, on street vending, that is investing in them and their security and their dignity may not land them into the middle class tomorrow, but it may in 10 years, and it absolutely does a generation later. And so I do want to just underscore the importance of implementing the street vending reform that we passed in January, overrode the previous mayor's veto on, which would create licenses for 20,000 street vendors. And that applies to the deliveristas, the hairdressers, the taxistas, all of these folks that are at the bottom of our, in sort of our income scale. They are the next generation of professional New Yorkers. They're giving birth to the next generation of New Yorkers in the middle class, and so I really just want to underscore that importance.
How do we connect young people to pathways? The highest unemployment rate is among young people. How do we make sure they have access, pathways, internship, mentorship? But more importantly, when we talk about DCAS students have to know they waive the fees for them. Low-income New Yorkers, those fees are waived. And I know under the previous commissioner, him and I sat together and he created a program where entry level, you can come into the job workforce entry level with no high school diploma, but they will support you to help you get your GED through a partnership I told them with D79, that would be a great partnership to create that pathway to start moving folks up. It's not going to be overnight, but you can work your way up and create career ladders. And CUNY and also, I keep saying we have to be aligned. We have to be talking to each other to see how do we create partnership with private sector too. We leave them out, small businesses, chambers. Those are all entry points for our communities to have access to.
Thank you, Councilmember. Unfortunately, we are just about out of time. So if my audience will join me in a round of applause for amazing panelists. Thank you all so much. Thank you for the great work that you're doing. And we so appreciate your time this morning. Thank you. Don't go anywhere because we will bring our second group of panelists right up. I'm going to shift down one chair and we're going to move right into it.
Thanks a lot. It's okay. Next time.
All right, if our panelists can come and join me up on the stage, we're going to move right into the conversation. Hi, everyone. Welcome. You'll find a name tag on your chair. Right here.
Thanks, hi. Good to see you.
Thanks so much for doing this.
Ruben, great to see you.
Great job on this first
Oh, thanks so much. Come on in. Christine, all right. All right, good morning again, everyone. All right, I think we've lost just a tiny bit of focus, so let's just try one more time. Folks, if you could take your seats, come on in. There's actually some seats in the front if folks want to move up, and let's try one more time. Good morning.
Morning.
All right, I think Councilmember Dinowitz is right. Not a ton of teachers in the audience, but that response is pretty good. So let's get right into it. Thank you all again so much for being here. If you're just tuning in, I'm Eli Dvorkin, Editorial and Policy Director at the Center for an Urban Future. So great to see all of you here in the room. We've got a couple hundred folks more tuning into the live stream, and we're going to get right into it. I will mention who you all are, but if you want to read more about our illustrious panelists, check out the full bios in your program. But we are so pleased and thrilled to be joined today by Lauren Anderson, who is the Vice Chancellor for Career Engagement and Industry Partnerships at CUNY, Ruben Ogbonna, Executive Director and co-founder of the Marcy Lab School, Deborah Ellen Glickstein, the Executive Director and founder of NYC Kids Rise, Dr. Kim Carter-Evans, Executive Vice President and Chief Operating Officer, True Fund Financial Services, and Justine Zinkin, CEO of Neighborhood Trust Financial Partners. Welcome, all of you. Thank you so much for being here today.
Thanks for having us.
You guys, y'all can applaud too. Such a delight to dig into this topic with the five of you. And I think as you all heard, there is clearly an appetite and interest in government to really start to figure out more policy solutions around the other side of affordability. And as our research has shown at the Center for Urban Future, this problem has become only more acute just in the last few years. Our research showed, for instance, that since the pandemic, median rent in New York City has risen at twice the rate of median incomes. And so whatever the city can do to help reduce costs, our research suggests it's going to be maybe impossible to keep up with the affordability challenges that New Yorkers are facing without an equal focus on the other side of the equation, boosting incomes, creating more pathways to good jobs, building assets and wealth. And that's exactly why we brought you all together to talk about this today. And I wanted to start by asking all of you around, if you agree with this premise, that we've got to focus on the other side of the equation, where do we begin? What are the key priorities that policymakers should be focusing on to make more progress in helping New Yorkers afford the most expensive city in North America, not only by helping to control costs, but by helping to lift up incomes and build wealth? Where should policymakers be focused?
Well, I don't know if anyone wants to jump in, but I will
Go
jump
for it.
in. So one of the things that is really near and dear to my heart is entrepreneurship. And the other side of it is not just lowering costs, but making sure that we're also raising incomes. And entrepreneurship is one of the things that is often talked about around, what ways can we increase our income? Is it only wage, or is it making sure that there are access to training so that community members can monetize some of the things that they're doing every day? And as a CDFI leader, which is a community development financial institution, that's at the premise of our work. It is making sure that we're building small business owners, building entrepreneurs, and making sure that they're capitalized. Because if you think about, there's no shortage of entrepreneurs. When you walk the streets, and I love that the council member said, she is a a second or third generation of a street vendor. There's no shortage of that. But we've got to meet those entrepreneurs where they are and make sure that they have access to training, make sure that they have access to affordable capital, and there's a clear and distinctive difference into different types of capital so that they can actually grow their small businesses. The heart of entrepreneurship, we see it every day when we walk the streets. They know how to operate. They know how to make money. The inherent gap is, how do I take that capital? How do I take the money that I'm earning and move from a mental mindset of survival into generational wealth building? How do I capitalize on that? How do I move beyond just that day-to-day piece? And I think that, when you think about policymakers, right now, policymakers have the opportunity, and I think the first panel really talked about it, is early intervention. I work with entrepreneurs every day, and one of the inherent differences is it's a lack of financial acumen. And so the only way that you shift that generation to generation and really look at generational wealth building is the early intervention. And the reality is you can teach entrepreneurship and financial acumen as early as on the playground. Because if you really watch playground antics, they are operating in a state of entrepreneurship and they don't even know what the word entrepreneur is. I myself am a third generation entrepreneur, and I often tell this story of at 8 years old, I started my first business. I did not know the word entrepreneurship. I didn't fully understand how that was going to take me or where it was going to take me. Had no idea that I would be sitting here, but I was just running around my neighborhood selling, selling and monetizing my natural gifts. So I think that's one way on the other side of affordability that today, the policymakers can make additional investment into the educational platforms and make sure that that is, and I love that he said, monitor it, place metrics around it so that you can also hold the departments of education accountable and the schools accountable. But there has to be financial literacy training and also entrepreneurial training as early on as the pre-K. I think even in that realm. And I think that will, over time, we will see the mental shift of financial acumen in our constituents.
But it really resonates with me because I've got a 6-year-old who's constantly pretending to sell ice cream at the playground, but I've never taught him about cost of goods sold or whatever, so I got work to do. But I got to get on that. But I love that as a starting point. I'd love to hear other thoughts about what else needs to be part of this agenda. If you were going to walk into a meeting with the mayor later today to kind of pitch him on what needs to be part of this other side of affordability agenda, what's on the list?
Well, if I could just build on that,
Absolutely.
because I think the point of creating businesses is a great one. I think the other side is how do we promote economic mobility by connecting to opportunities that already exist, but folks don't have access to them or not ready for them. And I think that's super important because, yes, higher incomes is very significant for being able to afford more in the city, being able to afford the cost of living, but also it really insulates the city from many economic shocks and insulates more people from what might happen in the future. During the pandemic, it was the low-wage industries, the frontline facing, the in-person industries that really had the highest job losses. Not surprisingly, the higher wage industries were also the ones that recovered faster. And so it's helpful to think about how do we create an environment where more people can access more prosperity just based on what we already have available. I think fortunately in New York City, unlike every place across the country, what is great is that policymakers don't have to dig very far to understand what works. We have some excellent models here in New York across education providers, across training providers, that really have been proven to move the needle to help folks who would otherwise not have access career paths that aren't just in STEM or in-demand industries, but also that have longevity, that have clear promotional paths, which is really important. So I think that there are some very actionable steps that policymakers can take immediately. And if they do, what is so exciting is that the potential for impact and scale is huge for so many reasons that we've already heard on this panel. But we have 235 students who are already in CUNY seeking degrees. We have another 220,000 students who have raised their hands to participate in non-degree programs. You have 173,000 students who are enrolled in training programs according to the New York City Workforce Development Dashboard. Those are people who have already raised their hands to take a proactive step to understand how they can get the credentials and skills they need to afford living in this city. And when they do, the promotion of folks into the middle class will create more tax revenue that actually allows us to invest in the things that will help folks who are not yet accessing those opportunities. So yes, and 1,000%, I think that that's another side of the equation.
I wanted to just step back for 1 second and acknowledge a little bit what Jonathan said earlier. And I was thinking about 10 years ago, I was running the city's Office of Financial Empowerment. And as Justine knows well, as they had done so much groundbreaking work with them, one of the main anchor pieces of the Office of Financial Empowerment is this network of financial counseling that happens across the city. New York City is known that this is an amazing thing that New York City pioneered. And so it's like at that time, it was like 50,000 New Yorkers coming into these centers. So back then, though, we were looking at it, people are coming in with obviously serious economic security issues, can't pay the bills, may not have the information that they need, but generally, like, you can't make up where is the income gonna come? Like, where is it, like, the labor market was broken then, it's still somewhat broken now. And so we decided to look at how do we think about the structural reasons why so many folks are coming with such serious financial challenges. And so, as my worldview is, we looked at neighborhoods. What are the conditions within a neighborhood that will reinforce or, really accelerate economic opportunities? And so back then, there were 4 main, economic entities, we'll call it, that were, the drivers for this real, economic insecurity or, holding people back. One of them was childcare. Not surprising. One of them was housing. One of them was groceries, and the other was financial services. So I just want to give some props, just as Jonathan said, where props is due, because to be in a situation right now where, from a structural perspective, at least 3 of those are already right out of the gate, kind of moving forward, is obviously super significant for New York City, and I'm certainly proud to kind of be a part of it. The piece I want to throw in right now, and I know there will be a lot more conversation over the next hour, is around ownership and ownership stakes and assets. Yeah. And I know you got to get at this, and again, we'll talk more about it, but especially the work that we're doing right now with NYC Kids Rise is very focused on early wealth building as early as possible. And it's really creating this moment of opportunity both in New York City, the state, and the country to have attention of why it is so important for folks to have assets as soon as possible, but then also have really, not only for the financial reasons, but have a stake in the economy.
And I can use this opportunity to thank Deborah Ellen for her leadership early on in the Office of Financial Empowerment. So we at Neighborhood Trust now provide financial counseling as a vendor for the Financial Empowerment Center program, as well as run a program enabling the private sector to invest in worker financial health and security, and enabling housing providers to invest in worker financial health and security. And not to be sort of painting a gloomy picture, but to focus on one of the pillars that Deborah Ellen mentioned, financial services. What we really want to focus on is that across all of these initiatives, all of these goals, whether it's entrepreneurship, workforce development, career development, the typical New Yorker is struggling because they are actually preyed upon by the financial services system. They're either shut out or they're actually being exploited by this system. It's really, really interesting to look at some of the data to see that 22% of New Yorkers are credit invisible. So they're entirely outside of the financial services mainstream. Think about many of those individuals are aspiring entrepreneurs. In order for them to achieve those goals, we have to tackle the fact that that individual is outside of the system. And as they're trying to access capital, they're paying a premium. They're getting trapped in debt. And then sort of psychologically, there's sort of this sense of barriers too high to climb. We see that about half of New Yorkers don't have prime credit, so they have this additional expense. We actually see at Neighborhood Trust, because we track predatory debt usage, that about half of our clients, the typical client being a home health aide, who's making $35,000, they are using at least 2 predatory products. And spending about 20% of their income, so about 20% of their wages, are siphoned off in the form of predatory financial services. So we see this as sort of a key feature of all of our work, and make sure that financial services and the economy is enabling a level playing field in order for any of these initiatives to be successful.
And you're absolutely right in those data points, because over half of our clients are coming into the CDFI landscape from predatory lending, and we find
Exactly.
ourselves refinancing the existing debt to get them into a more affordable payment,
Yes.
you know, and a better path forward. So that's absolutely on point.
I'm very excited to talk.
Yes.
I clearly agree with everything that's been said. Dr. Evans, your comments inspired me. My family also comes from an entrepreneurial background. My father is from, my whole family is from Nigeria. My father immigrated here in the 80s. He grew up on the losing side of a civil war. And as a result of that, him and his family and his entire region were locked out of traditional institutions. And so in many ways, entrepreneurship was the only way that they could make a living for themselves. So when he came over to the United States, in many ways, himself, his family, they took that mindset with them. To this day, like when I think about my uncles, the generation above me, I don't know a single that kind of male figure in my life that doesn't work for themselves in some way. And I think implicitly I learned that entrepreneurship was the pathway for people who have been locked out of institutions. And the people that we're speaking on behalf of, many of them, they find themselves in that position. And so I come at this work from the perspective of an educator and someone in the kind of skills training space, but as much as so much of the discourse I think will be shaped by AI and the future of the knowledge economy, we can't miss out on the opportunity to continue to promote and enable entrepreneurship for so many people. And with that being said, I think about in this particular moment as the global economy and in particular New York's knowledge economy is probably at the start of a reshaping. I can't emphasize enough the importance of training and education to prepare our young people for the things that are to come. And so much of the emphasis is on the kind of shiny tech tools and AI and those, and there's a ton to discuss around that. But as a former middle school and high school teacher, I've been thinking so much about early literacy and literacy in general. And if I was a funder, if I was a city council person, like I know I'm probably being inundated by proposals about the next round of AI skills training, and certainly please fund those, please fund my proposals. But this is the moment to be funding the unsexy stuff that is going to prepare our young people and our institutions to be able to take advantage of this opportunity that could otherwise leave many people behind.
Thanks, Ruben. And just speaking of unsexy stuff, if everyone could just move their microphones a little closer, I think especially for our online audience, thank you all so much. Well, I want to ask about a little bit more about all of this. And one thought that occurs to me as we structure this conversation is to break out some solutions between things that are a little more near term and things that are a little bit more long term. Obviously, things like early literacy may be very long term with huge returns over time. But I want to start with maybe some of the near term things, in part because New Yorkers are feeling this affordability crisis right now. They're looking for ways to lower their costs or boost their incomes now. And one of the policy options that's on the table that the mayor has talked about is raising the minimum wage. And we certainly have seen the data shows that the increase from $7.25 to $17 over the past decade and a half has been a major contributor to reducing poverty in New York. But it's also a policy that the state has to implement, at least under current rules. And if folks haven't noticed, Albany seems pretty busy right now, a little tied up. So I wanted to ask you all about when it comes to near-term, relatively rapid solutions, ideas that can help with the other side of affordability. And I do want to talk about the long-term things, are just as important to us. But when you think about things that can happen sooner, the things that we can kind of do right away, but that don't necessarily require Albany, that the city can do, what are some of those things, some of those ideas that help with this other side of the equation in the short term?
Well, I can jump in and say, we sort of like the idea of saying, like, in addition to increasing the minimum wage, let's increase the effective minimum wage, to just build on the point I was just making, right? Where not only are people getting paid below what they should, but again, 20% of their wages are siphoned off the top. Let's return cash to workers' pockets. And I will say that already the Department of Consumer and Worker Protection is doing absolutely amazing work on this front. Their sort of social justice lens is examining how to put workers' money back in workers' pockets, and there are very specific ways in which we can do that. You can literally go sort of predatory product by predatory product and identify how to basically regulate out these products. There's incredible opportunity because of the sort of strength of the SHIELD Act, as an example, that Mamdani just implemented, that is sort of cracking down on predatory collections practices, to keep that going and basically going sort of product by product and ensuring that nobody has to rely on those products. And then the other piece I will say is that, building off of the work of the Office of Financial Empowerment, The amazing work of financial counseling being done not in isolation, but blended into all of the initiatives that are being discussed in the stage, make all the difference in the world. They enable people to avoid expensive services, to access asset-building products, and there's so much more we can do to expand that program, to enable financial counseling to be embedded in every single agency in the city, and then, as I'm excited to talk about, to hold the private sector accountable as well for ensuring that people are making the most of their hard-earned wages.
And I'll continue with that because it really is a continuum. I think in the right now is funding the ownership that you spoke about. One of the things that I've seen, you know, having a national lens, I get the honor and the privilege of going to different municipalities and really having very similar conversations. And one of the things that I have seen work is funding ownership. That's immediate. That is just a matter of appropriation, putting the construct of the program in place and execution. In the city of Atlanta, you know, one of the things that you often hear is the path to wealth building is ownership, but it really focuses on the linear piece of home ownership. You don't hear a lot of the conversations around what does commercial real estate ownership look like and how does that create a continuum of generational wealth building and also community wealth building and economic development. That particular city, through their economic development engine, appropriated a fund to support down payment assistance, not just for home ownership, but for commercial real estate ownership. What they then did was partnered with the CDFI industry who actually had products for ownership. And one of the things that we ideated around was what is the gap? Because doing a legacy study, we learned that so many legacy businesses that were in the second and third generation did not own the asset. They had been leasing for 20, 30 years. They could have owned the piece of property. And if you imagine 20, 30 years ago, if you took ownership then, what would that mean for not only the family that owned, but the community that that building or that asset reside within? And so we ideated around a product because the barrier was a lack of cash flow to support the 30% down payment for commercial real estate ownership. Working with several of our bank partners, Wells Fargo being one, so I want to give them a shout out. They supported us with a CRA grant to actually create a B note to an A product for commercial real estate ownership, specifically for entrepreneurs based on community wealth building. And so what's the difference there? This is not a portfolio builder. This is not for the developer to build their portfolio of ownership. This is for the entrepreneur that resides, that works, and that lives within the community. So we put a requirement of owner occupancy. That entrepreneur has to occupy 25% of the property, and with the other 75%, they are now leasing out to other community entrepreneurs. That's where you went. And so when you think about, we were able to get up to 90% LTV, so that closed that 20% or 30% down payment gap, but the city came in with an additional 5 to 10%. So we had many entrepreneurs that were walking away with commercial real estate with 0% down payment because of the partnership between city, municipality, private sector, and then the CDFI sector. So that's when you really see that continuum and you see real partnership work for the communities.
I love what you just said, and I want to take us back to New York City. So in 2014, if you were going to go into a classroom in Mott Haven, in the Bronx, right, you would have to go into, the first one, you're not going to find any kids with a 529 account. You'd have to go into 4 more classrooms to find one kid with a 529 account. And so a 529 account is our country's vehicle for college and career training, talking about kind of getting to what you guys are talking about there. And so, and if you think about ownership and you think about access to capital markets and how do we actually build assets, and while this isn't going to be like something that happens like tomorrow, but if you don't start now, it's never going to happen, right? So, so now, you know, thanks to government, because this is all policy decisions anyway, the city, New York City Public Schools, many partners in communities across the city, we now, thanks to the Save for College program, literally every kid in Mott Haven and really every kindergarten through 4th grade across the whole city now has a scholarship account invested in a New York 529. So what has happened here, again, just so many people deserve credit as public-private community partnership, is there is this infrastructure, which is like, the social and financial infrastructure across our city that really connects everyone to capital markets and every kid early on. There's about $80 million. There's about 380,000 kids with these accounts. And this is something that, the research is just by having a small dollar account, you're 3 times more likely to go to college. This is all about, it's actually about the money, but it's also about expectations about what's possible for your future and what choices you make early on when you're in 1st grade, when you're in 4th grade, when you're in 8th grade, that lead you kind of towards these career paths and your opportunities. And so again, it's just this connected to ownership, and then what we can do from here next as we think about as a city, with philanthropy, with government, with private business, how we can come together to continue to take this to the next level.
Well, Deborah, let me just ask you, I'd love to follow up on exactly that point. And you think about sort of, is the mission accomplished? And, we've now, all you have to do is activate your accounts, or what is the next step there?
Oh, gosh, okay. That's such a great
You teed yourself up, but I want to hear it.
All right, I'm gonna give us three concrete next steps, okay? The first one, as every kid gets an initial $100. Families can take additional steps, earn more money. Entities can add more money into these accounts. We have a car dealer in Jackson Heights. They do $20 every car sold into the accounts of kids at one school, PS 148. We have public school alumni raising money and contributing to the kids who are currently sitting in their seats. It's going to be $1 million contributed just through this campaign for public housing alumni over the last 3 years. And really, that's just the beginning of what can happen here. How do we get kids more money? And that's sort of one of the things. How do we get kids more money early on? The second piece is, how do we really embed this? Now we're about 5 years in, working across all the boroughs, embed this into the fabric of New York City. We've talked a lot here about financial capital so far, but social capital is one of the pillars I would put high on the list of what is the other side of affordability here. What are we doing to make sure that everyone knows what's possible and everyone's getting connected to diverse economic backgrounds and people from different places? And so this is a platform to help sort of make that possible. In Red Hook Houses, the Red Hook Initiative is working to make sure every kid in Red Hook knows that they have this money for their future. Neighborhood settlement houses on the Lower East Side are working to integrate this into their after-school programs, to work with their school teams to make sure that there's financial education and activating their accounts there. The third piece I'll mention is very, very much connected to social capital and connecting. So I mentioned there's 380,000 families with these accounts. That's 380,000 people with their own social and financial capital, right? Everyone in public school has it, kid through 4th grade. Now it's going to be everyone in public school. So what does it look like if we were a city that really took care of all of our kids? How do we each, whether we're like a neighborhood settlement house or a NYC resident association or a family, how do we tap into our own networks to bring other kids along, bring other families along? And I'm really excited about that next frontier of this work.
So, and my apologies, Eli, because I don't want to become the question asker, but I have a question for you.
Okay.
So with those in your vision for the future, how do we then take the path just a little step further and connect the dots between making sure that the families understand? Because we can create at our theoretical level all day long, and yes, there is a tangible asset in the capital and the money that's being created for these youth. But do their families fully understand the integration between the money is here and how do I leverage that money? Like, what do I do with that? What do I teach my child? Because we talked about it earlier. The path for every kid is not necessarily a traditional university. So for the one that's not going to a community college or a university, how do they then leverage that capital for some other types of wealth building?
Well, I'll quickly answer, and then I don't know, maybe you want to talk, you guys can talk to it. Well, the oldest kids now are in 8th grade from the pilot, where we started it in Western Queens. But so more to come on them growing up and using it. I will say I'm very excited about our current school's chancellor and the commitment to financial education that we know is coming down from the state, as well as coming down from from the administration here. and the commitment overall to make sure, families need to know that they have this money, as you're saying. We want to make sure kids know they have this money, and you want to understand also, college and career savings. Look, I'm excited about this because I'm excited because I want everyone to have that broad asset that they know about so that you have opportunities for your life. This happens to be for college and career savings, which is super important in its own. But the idea that, this is integrated into those pathways and curriculums and part of the middle school counseling, part of all that, that's all, why it's a public-private community partnership.
Thank you for that.
Do you want to build on that? I have a couple of additional thoughts just to add to that. One is super exciting and I think is really actionable, and two, it goes back to Ruben's point of the deeply unsexy work that underpins all of this. Starting with that one, data is absolutely critical to be able to design and formulate any of the things that we're talking about up here. And in the particular realm that we think about, one of the things that's really unclear at this point is data on how AI is impacting the entry-level labor market here in New York City. So at New York State, we are one of the only states to have in what's called our warn notices the option for companies before they lay off a large group of people to specify, is this because of AI or not? We're one of the only states that has that box. No one has checked that box yet, and there have been a lot of layoffs in New York State. So the way that we're trying to collect data around this is really not yet precise, and I don't believe takes Albany's approval or even state agencies to be able to take action. There's work that we can do here in New York City to try to understand from businesses exactly what are the considerations that they might be putting into play when they're deploying AI, using AI, and what is the impact that they are projecting on their entry-level targets and hiring. So that's one thing, deeply unsexy data, but I think there's work that we can do around encouraging reporting of that information from businesses. The second thing, taking this in a little bit of a different direction, but back to the education and career space, is, Eli mentioned a stat about how job openings have really declined in New York City. The recent report from CUF made it clear that internships have declined from 11,000 in New York to 7,000 in New York in 2024. In that same period of time at CUNY, we actually saw the percentage of students participating in paid internships go up, which really speaks to the fact that there are proactive strategies that you can put in place that have very tangible results on if students can access and New Yorkers can access these kind of opportunities. It takes proactive relationship building. It takes understanding that there are actually businesses that are raising their hands to provide these opportunities to students, but because of the nature of their business, they might not be able to reliably predict that they can afford bringing a student on, and we don't support unpaid internships at CUNY, so that's important to note. So we actually have seen that not only is there outsized student demand for opportunities that would help them get the workplace experience that they need to be able to really enter jobs with high promotional potential, employers actually are raising their hands to do this as well, but there isn't sufficient funding for us to be able to serve all 16,000 students that raise their hands to apply to internship programs just at CUNY Central, let alone our campuses. So some of the things tangibly that we can do are scale the solutions that are building these proactive pathways. And at CUNY, we just launched something called CUNY Beyond, which really scales practices that have been shown to work in a couple key areas. For example, we know that students who participate in paid internships are 3 times more likely to have job offers when they graduate. We know that students who meet with integrated career and academic advisors are 2 times more likely to have job offers when they graduate. So advisors who not only talk about what classes you need to take, but also talk about what are the career milestones you need to hit as well in order to pursue the path that you want. And it is that you want, because this needs to occur across all potential pathways, not just engineering, not just marketing, every single one of them. So there are really concrete practices that we are looking to scale, but the problem right now is that they're only reaching a fraction of our students and a fraction of the New Yorkers who sign up for workforce training programs. One quick note, community colleges, senior colleges, et cetera, they do also have non-degree programs, so if someone doesn't want to go to college, they also can go to training programs both through nonprofit providers and through university systems writ large. But the challenge is really ensuring that people understand what those key practices are that really move the needle and can plug in today to scaling them, because the rails are there, the interest is there, what's not there is funding.
I'll say that when I think about this side of affordability, kind of pathways to employment, in some ways I think about this having 2 sides as well. Like, I think what gets a lot of attention is side number 2, which is like on-ramps to employment, but there's side number 1, which is like training and preparation for employment. And as a kind of leader of a school that is training people for careers, many of which haven't yet been invented yet, I'm spending a lot of time thinking about how do we upgrade our training and our education. And what feels like a really pertinent opportunity right now is to examine how AI is being kind of developed in this particular economic moment and how it's kind of shaping the conversation around the impact of AI on entry-level hiring. In other words, I tend to say that it's a bit of a shame that this moment is taking place in terms of AI's development during this moment in the economic cycle. This kind of confluence of like the economy shedding jobs and AI coming up together. It's not coincidental. It just so happens that like companies can get a boost by saying that like these layoffs that we probably would be doing anyway, given everything that's happening in the world and a war, we can boost efficiency by saying these are AI-based layoffs. And I think the challenge with that is because they're happening at the same time, like what the conversation in the media that's happening is, we should be walking away from this kind of sector as a whole, like technology, data, engineering is a sector that is kind of no longer worth pursuing because like we don't see jobs in that right now. And it's hard to predict the future. I think anybody who says they know what's happening 3 or 4 years from now, you probably should be skeptical. But I'm always trying to look to the past to determine like what patterns can we learn from, and knowing that there's not like one true analogy, but 2000 the tech economy imploded, and we happened to be entering into a war, and there happened to be a number of reasons why the economy structurally was really kind of wobbly. And I can imagine at that moment when Amazon loses 90% of its share price, and all these startups that had no product in the first place failed. I'm sure many people were, probably skeptical of sending students into computer science careers. And then 4 years later, Facebook comes out, and there's an entirely new wave of companies and an entire economy that stands up. And we knew, in hindsight, we can see what the demographics of the people who were able to participate in that looked like. And I guess I say that because right now, anytime I log on to LinkedIn or anytime I look into CNN, like I just hear about the apocalypse, a lot, not just with tech jobs, but like jobs generally. But as I'm on the ground with our employer partners and talking to CTOs and talking to VPs of engineering, like I'm just seeing the excitement that they have about all the ways that their companies are changing and all the different kind of innovations that are going to be coming in the years to come. And I guess I bring this up because there's an opportunity right now, not just an opportunity, but I would say a need for all training providers, colleges, high school, post-secondary programs to be thinking about like what their curriculums look like today and how they should be evolving in the coming years. Like anything that is taking place today, like a curriculum that was written 2 years ago, you can make the assumption that it is largely irrelevant. And the task upon high school principals, the task upon college, university presidents, nonprofit training providers to meet this moment has probably never been higher. And if I'm a city council person thinking about the future of my city's knowledge economy, investing in education and R&D to prepare students for this moment that is to come, there probably couldn't be a higher priority.
Agreed.
It's really helpful, Ruben. I just add to that, we've heard this a lot from our colleagues at CUNY and other universities. It's almost easier in New York to acquire a college than it is to launch 20 new courses, for example. So it's not, you're talking about principals and college leaders, but also it's a real issue for policymakers, and we can dig more into that too. But I want to ask all of you all, as we think through more of the ideas and the solutions here, certainly I'm open to the long-term solutions, and that they don't all have to be quick wins. But I'm also thinking about the realities of where the city is right now in terms of the budget. We're right in the middle of the budget process. Obviously, the state budget is, I don't know, a couple weeks late, and it's not coming tomorrow. But although as I say that, maybe it'll come tomorrow. But one of the big challenges here is where do we make progress when the city's got a $5 billion or so budget gap to fill, and that budget gap gets worse, in the out years, for structural reasons in terms of our expenses exceeding our revenue, but also because of the pressures coming from Washington. So I wanted to ask all, as we think about more of the solutions here, and I'm open to new investments. Lauren, you teed that up, and I want to hear what those should be. But I think my question here is, we have a $120 billion budget as it is as a city, more. Where should we be spending the money? What are the things we absolutely must be investing dollars in that would generate the greatest return in terms of tackling the other side of affordability? But I'd also love for one idea from all of you for an idea or a solution that doesn't cost money or doesn't cost much. I'm open to both, and I'd love to kind of get your thoughts about where should those dollars go, maybe even including where we shouldn't be spending our money because we're not getting the return, and what's something else that policymakers should be looking at that doesn't have to cost very much?
I'm happy to jump in and again emphasize our point that from our perspective, until we tackle people's reliance on debt and predatory services, there's a barrier to moving forward that's really sort of intractable. So an opportunity that's available already is we have an amazing network of CDFIs in New York City, Community Development Financial Institutions, that do amazing work, that are committed to inclusive finance and helping individuals overcome the greatest challenge that we see. So just to emphasize, a lot of times CDFIs are known for their investment in small business. What we see is the value that is to the worker and the consumer. The biggest challenge is the individual who, and this is majority of New Yorkers, living paycheck to paycheck. But what that means in reality is at a moment in time in that 2-week period, they run out of cash. And when they run out of cash, they rely on expensive debt. And that expensive debt causes this vicious cycle. There's a CDFI network out there that is tailored to solving this problem, that has available products and services, that is embedded in the community, so that the local community understands their own community. My favorite story, since we come from Neighborhood Trust Federal Credit Union, is when we asked our membership why they banked with us, what product, was it because we had the best prices, et cetera. Every single person literally scribbled on the piece of paper, Marisol. Everybody was coming in because they trusted Marisol, and they wanted her to look at their bank statement and to tell them what to do with that bill. So that sort of trusted financial institution is already available in the city, but they're low visibility. They don't really focus on sort of massive campaigns. They're fighting an upstream battle because of very well-financed predatory financial services. The Mamdani administration has an amazing opportunity to take that really strong network and infrastructure and have a massive campaign around bank with your local CDFI. And just to bundle into this, there's already an existing program, the Safe Start program, so that every New Yorker can have access to a basic banking product. Guess what? There are 5 relatively small financial institutions participating. Nobody's really participating. No banks are motivated. They're not really incentivized. And there's a single product that I will say candidly is mediocre. It still allows example for minimum balance fees. So there's an opportunity to take that infrastructure, that program design, and motivate financial institutions around the city, require them to offer those basic banking services to ensure that the key barriers to financial security and mobility, the other side, are being solved by the financial institutions who are already receiving city deposits, et cetera, and make sure that they offer a starter savings account, a credit establishment account, a cash and a flash, access to emergency cash in an affordable way. There's just a huge opportunity there at minimal cost.
Can I actually just build on your first point, which is the resources that already exist that people don't know about and don't access? I think that's a common theme no matter what kind of intervention you're talking about. So at CUNY, we are very fortunate already to have proven models, including industry specialists who sit in academic departments. And when those industry specialists work with cohorts, what we see is that students are more likely to find jobs through those industry specialists, and students who do find a job through those industry specialists are 97% of those jobs are aligned with their major versus 30% writ large across CUNY, because we have students who enroll in CUNY, have the job they've always had, that is year-round, that is dependable income for their family, and they don't say no to those jobs in order to take an internship or do other things. So it's really important that we're understanding the jobs that students are getting in relation to where they want to go, and one indicator is that related to their major. These industry specialists, though not yet available at scale, that's an investment, that would be great, they do exist and they are ready and they are available to work with businesses that want to connect with those folks and a talent pool at CUNY that can actually help their businesses grow. The issue is that the word is not out because a lot of industry engagement is sector-based in New York City. There isn't a universal place for it, except for the fact that government actually does touch people in various places every day in many ways, and it does touch businesses in various cases in many ways. And what I think we haven't yet mastered is the city is wonderful at using its convening power to bring together a few high-profile folks in a few high-profile areas. But what we maybe have more opportunity for immediately is making sure that those existing touch points with New Yorkers are leveraged to be able to provide them with information about what they need, not just for the one transaction they've come in for, but for all of the services that might be available to help them that already exist that they can leverage, but for the fact they don't know about them. So I think that's one huge actionable opportunity that doesn't require a lot of money.
Yeah, I agree. And, a part of just, accessing services that are already in existence, and I love that you say you give credit where it's due. I think SBS in the city of New York is doing an amazing job with making sure that there's not only access to capital, but there's access to programs through their CDFI network, and then also access to procurement opportunities. But I'd like to just say, let's heighten procurement as one of those pathways.
Yes.
And it costs us nothing more because the city is already spending billions of dollars on various different types of services that small business owners and community members can actually do these types of jobs and this work. They can increase their spend. Most cities will say, we have a goal of a 25%, a 30%, 35%. Why is that the benchmark? Why can we not increase it to 50 or 51%? I don't think there's any barrier to that, and that doesn't cost us anything. Just increase our spend in how we procure dollars and making sure that we're spending that money in the community so that it stays within the community.
That's a very quick follow-up on that point, Kim, actually.
Yes.
So one thing that jumps out at me when I look at the data on MWB contracting is that a lot of the procurement, there's still big disparities in terms of the demographics of those business owners. And so my one quick question would be, if the city wants to not only boost MWB contracting goals, but make sure that more of those businesses are Black and Latino owned, whereas the case today, they're still very underrepresented in terms of who's actually winning those contracts. Is there one good idea there that the city should do?
90% of white women.
Yep, I was just about to. So it's access, and it's clear parameters. And in this political environment, especially since this is streaming, I'm going to be very politically correct here, and I'm not going to call out what you just did. So, but you're spot on there. Are these really underserved businesses that are gaining the contracts, and how do we mitigate that and really put guardrails around, what does our community reflect? And are the procurement, the contracts that are being, made, are they actually going to the community, or are they going to?
White women.
Okay. So you got me. So I think that's one piece. But the other piece is that other demographic of underserved and undercapitalized entrepreneur. That's the barrier. The other demographic does not have a lack of access to capital. The other demographic does not have that lack of access. They can go to your traditional bank and get the money that they need to mobilize on the contract once they get the opportunity. They can go to the local bank and say, okay, well, I have a operational need. I need $100,000 or I need $1 million. The other demographic does not have equitable access. And so if the city could support that equitable access, I think that's going to be key in making sure that they can procure, because they can do the work. They just don't have the capital to mobilize.
So I can kind of piggyback a little bit off the CDFI concept. This is more of like a big idea that, let's see how it's COP, so I think I can offer it here. So the 529, which now everyone is going to be very familiar with if they weren't before, has about, I think if my numbers are correct, about $75 billion for New York State's 529. So as I mentioned also that, we'll at some point with the Safer College program have 1 million kids with these accounts in New York City. There's, you don't have to live in New York City or New York State to use this. And so this is run out of the state comptroller's office. So what if there was an option, right, with there's always reasons why things can't happen, but, maybe there could be a reason why it could happen where some of that money could be optionally redirected back into businesses or home ownership or other places into the state that could then be a circuitous route for community wealth building for all of our kids. That's where families work. That's where families live. And so that doesn't seem like that would cost a lot of money to do because the money is there, but there just has to be a political will and the interest to figure out how or what and what is appropriate, knowing that you need to be fiscally responsible. But $75 billion.
Love that.
I was going to say, Lauren, going back to your comment, my wife was one of those industry specialists. She was a specialist at John Jay. Yeah. And
Wow, that's awesome.
yeah, and the relationship that she built with her class, each year at Morgan Stanley, she would hire a John Jay student. And so it's like the kind of social capital and the networks that build, they kind of feed off of themselves. I'm thinking about the stat that Councilmember Sanchez gave, which was that there's a 15% vacancy rate across city agencies. And when I think about the state of the economy and the kind of workforce disruption, it's hard to imagine a world where things don't get worse before they get better. And in many ways, if this represents like a crisis or a disruption, then that means there's always some opportunity within it. And from our perspective at Marcy, we've seen both an uptick of folks from the private sector applying for roles of all types at our organization, and an uptick, of course, in our graduates wanting to go into the social sector, nonprofits, education, government, et cetera. And this crisis of talent that is now out on the market is an opportunity for the city agencies to both like upskill and modernize and bring fresh new ideas, and then hopefully in the long run, create a pipeline of folks who have touched the private sector, come through city agencies, nonprofits, education institutions, and will likely go back off to the private sector with the values and the learnings that they have, hopefully to make better products in the private sector. And so when I think about like either a low cost or no cost opportunity, is to reduce the barriers for folks to be able to move into public sector jobs, possibly reducing college degree requirements for skilled early career talent to participate in internships or apprenticeships. One of the beautiful things about this kind of AI revolution taking place is that it allows people to do a lot more with less. And so there are a generation of young technologists, older technologists, who, equipped with a few subscriptions, can come into an agency or come into a community-based organization and provide tools that make it easier for people to do their jobs. And what would it look like to, one, enable that, or two, possibly fund that? That's great.
Ruben and Lauren, I want to ask you both, again, one more kind of question that builds on what you both described in terms of the needs to be able to expand pathways through training. In the case of Marcy Lab, a year. CUNY could be anything from short-term workforce training all the way through to a 4-year degree. And Lauren, you mentioned, obviously the idea of building on CUNY Beyond. New investment would be needed to scale up, for instance, the industry advisor, the hybrid academic career advisors. But I'd love to hear a little bit more from both of you about if you were going to walk into to a meeting with the mayor tomorrow and talk about what specific steps would be most helpful for either boosting career outcomes for CUNY students specifically, or Ruben, in your case, to make sure that New Yorkers who are going to be skilled through alternative pathways, that you're able to both serve more New Yorkers, but also serve them more effectively. We know that there's a big role for the private sector. We know there's a role for philanthropy, but what is that? What are those other things that you need to see that you would like to see from government?
I think the point that the council member made earlier about, and Ruben is saying as well, about leveraging public sector hiring is a big one, not to be discarded as minimal. We are super fortunate to be in a moment in time where the stars are actually aligned to create more smooth pathways for New Yorkers into roles, even if the nature of those roles in New York is changing, is evolving, and different parts of the economy are growing and shrinking. And the reason for that is that we do, as I said before, have some sense of what works for moving the needle, at least within our institution. Those kinds of investments, yes, are things like the integrated industry advisors or the integrated academic and career advisors, as well as industry specialists. But there are also things like higher coordination across our agencies when it comes to employer engagement by utilizing technology that we actually could be using more to our advantage than we do. At CUNY, we have really made an effort over the past 4 years to maximize and amplify the relationships we have, because right now they are sitting in individual faculty members' hands or in individual departments, and there's no bird's eye view as to how we deepen and build the relationships we have, which is essential in this economy, because if we are actually going to make sure that the folks who don't traditionally have access to these roles are the ones who do, that's going to take a really deliberate, proactive relationship building process with employers. And we can't necessarily discard the private sector in that. We have to build relationships with them. Technology helps us to coordinate that work. But it is about investment in human capital in the places that you wouldn't expect it. So traditionally, short-term training programs, the federal government does fund some of them. Workforce Pell is a great example coming out. Our city is not ready to take advantage of it, frankly. because the expenses that are helpful and needed are actually industry specialists who sit in those short-term programs. And that is a high cost, and it's not something that's often contemplated when you're talking about scaling workforce initiatives. So I think we have a moment where there's a need to invest in concrete practices that we know work. There's a need to invest in technology to coordinate it all. There's a need to take advantage of the leverage points that we know are coming, like Workforce Pell, but we're not ready for yet because we don't have all of our ducks in a row to take advantage of it in the way that it has many specific constraints around. And I think it's something where it seems like because we have all of our campus presidents, some of whom are here today, raising their hands to be able to say, yes, I'm ready to transform my campus this way, because we have employers who want to participate but can't necessarily yet plug in because the way of planning and certainty and relationship building is not yet ready for them. I just think we have a lot of stars aligned where it could just be as easy as flipping a switch and taking a couple actions that would put that all into play.
I would certainly agree with that. And then I'd add just financially incentivizing apprenticeships and internships.
Yes,
That's
critical.
Yeah, there's an article that came out in the Wall Street Journal several months ago about companies increasing their share of entry-level recruiting from the top 10 colleges. And that shouldn't be surprising, but in a world where one, the economy is more uncertain, and two, AI is making it a little bit harder to decipher what's signal through noise, companies are going back to what they know and what they trust. And so in a world where college and non-college training providers are facing an uphill battle, the answer is to be able to get our students, our graduates, into the company so they can really demonstrate the value that they have. It's the reason why my wife, when she was in front of her John Jay students, like she knew that the first stop on her recruiting trip each year was going to be John Jay. And we have this opportunity to be this bridge between this uncertain moment now and what's surely to come, because all of these things are cyclical. And in a moment right now when companies are saying, I'm not hiring interns because of AI, we need to hear that as, I'm not hiring interns because it's much harder to raise venture capital. I'm not hiring interns because I'm unsure about what the economy will be a year from now. And so if the city can kind of fill the gap to be the bridge between now and the moment that will come, when those companies will have to hire interns again, we have an opportunity to ensure that those seats are filled with our CUNY graduates and our CBO program graduates.
And I think, and I hear you, but I think there's another path that we can explore, and I'm going to explore this from the CDFI perspective. CDFIs do a lot of great work with very limited capacity. And so when I think about, well, why are we not hiring interns, or why do we just not have the ability to, it's because we have this great feat in front of us, and we just cannot afford it. So I think that if there is, again, if I'm sitting in the mayor's office, it's, to your point, how do we also, we're building the capacity of the individuals, but how do we build the capacity of the agencies that are supporting the individuals? Because if we had the capacity, I'd go out and grab all of your students and bring them in. But when you're making a decision between, okay, I have this particular goal, do I have the capacity and opportunity to invest in, even though my heart says I want to invest in these young people, but I have to get to this goal tomorrow, but it's going to take me really developing the young people, so we may not get to that same goal till 2 years from now, simply because of the development window. But if I had the capacity to do so, I could take on those earlier stage, new individuals coming out into the workforce. In fact, that's my heart's desire. But if we could get that additional support to build our operational capacity, I think that's another pathway. Now, unfortunately, that does cost money. So, Mayor, if you're listening, we would love for you to invest in our infrastructure as well, because to your point, there are vast CDFI landscape in this market, and each of them in their own unique way. There's no one size creates equal, but each of us in our own unique way are doing great things in our communities, and I think I could go to every one of those CEOs and say, hey, would you take on 4 or 5 other individual interns, or from a job readiness program? And each one of them would say yes, but the next question is, but how do I pay them?
Right. We're happy to talk to you. Yeah. And the structures. Truly, it needs to be a partnership, and there's a range of ways that folks who are thinking and committed to developing talent in the city can plug in. It isn't just hosting an intern. It also is better if it's not just transactional. Like, what can you do in the amount of time you have and the capacity you have, not discounting the need for more capacity, but the capacity you have to actually be part of the development of that talent. And it's not always as high a lift as being able to take someone on and pay them. So yeah, give us a call.
Will do.
Well, on that optimistic note, I want to turn over to our audience as well. Many of those folks that you're describing, those potential partners, are right here in this room. They're also online. We're going to get to as many questions as we can, but there are a lot of you, including online, so please just keep your questions really brief if you can. Raise your hands. My colleagues will come with a microphone. I'll call on you. Let us know who you're here with. Keep your questions brief. We'll try to get to as many as we can. I'm also going to look for some questions online. Let me just first see a show of hands just to make sure I can see who's here in the room. And let's go to the back first, and then I'm going to also make sure we're getting folks from online as well. Yep, right there in the middle. Thank you.
Hi. Is this on? Yeah. Hi, I'm Jahanara. I grew up in the city, from the city. I'm just here on my own because I'm interested in urban policy research. I studied engineering and am currently unemployed and facing the whole change in the tech industry. And I'm just wondering how you guys talk to employers about hiring an AI, especially because with all of the new ATS systems, with resume checking and obviously AI being used for resumes, it does feel like a signal through noise problem on both ends. And I wonder how, especially for the people in education, how do you guys speak with employers about actually interviewing people with who maybe don't perfectly fit their applications that are posted online? Because I think now with the use of AI, they're expecting candidates who fit every single bullet, or expecting your resume to say that it fits every single bullet, even when it doesn't. And I just wonder how are we interfacing with those companies, because obviously those companies are also trying to be efficient in their hiring processes. But how can we kind of create, I guess, more of a dialogue with these people who are hiring to be more open to different kinds of candidates and taking on training?
Yeah. One, I'd just like to say that one, you're not alone, and I know how difficult a job search can be, especially in this market. And I hope that you know that this is not a reflection of you, but just how difficult this particular moment is. And would love to talk to you afterwards too. There's two things. One, I would also say that everything that you're experiencing, we're experiencing too. I can say that very confidently. Two things I'd say. One, we've had to really emphasize, as difficult as it feels, and it certainly feels difficult for our students, the power of leveraging our network. So hats off to you being here and the people that you'll meet here. But in a world in the past where we could just count on the kind of job search mechanisms doing a lot of the work for us, more and more now, both from our staff and kind of career services perspectives, and then also from our students, really putting ourselves out there to shake hands with people and kind of get to meet them so that you can filter through some of that noise, get to know an individual. And then the second thing that I'd say is we've also encouraged our team and our students to kind of broaden their scope for their search. A phrase that we've been using a lot more recently is getting your foot in the door, knowing that the first job isn't your last job. It's just kind of the thing that will get you on your journey. And so one of the questions we've been asking our students are where your passions are, and outside of that core job title that you've been looking for, what are other kind of adjacent fields that may have a bit more green space, a bit more opening, where you can begin to express some of that so that you can build your resume, get to know more people, and find that next step in your journey. And I know it's not super satisfying because it is just hard in this moment, but I do want to say that you're doing the right things.
Yeah, and just to add to that, there is sort of a not explicit hidden code in terms of how you format things that go into an ATS and what is on there and what isn't, and how that makes it through the process, that makes it very hard to understand actually how to be successful in the process at companies that are seeing thousands of applications a day. There are many organizations that are trying to make that hidden code more explicit. CEO Jobs Council has published a lot of resume guides, et cetera, to try to help folks navigate a world that is not readily apparent in the first place. And those are available online that you could take a look at. The other thing, just to underscore what Ruben is saying, our computer science graduates and engineers have historically had a very linear path to a job, but thinking about, to Ruben's point, what are the transferable skills that you've learned that now could be applicable in any field as AI, as like prompting and logical reasoning spread to any sector? What are not just like the adjacent jobs, but the adjacent sectors that are going to need your transferable skills? I think that's something important to consider, because one of the reasons that we see employers really eager to build partnerships with CUNY and see small and mid-sized businesses interested in coming to us to find talent even when they can't afford it and they want to know how to do it, is because students who are graduating now are inherently of an era where they know more about how AI is impacting their lives and their world than many of the managers that are looking to hire them do. And that is really an amazing potential skill set that you could bring to a lot of places where you might not even know that they're looking for that, but there are ways to be able to think more broadly, not just in the big companies, but the small ones that ultimately give you the experience you need to move into whatever path you're looking for.
That's a great point. I would just love to build on that again to your point of entrepreneurship. I think the one other, there's like, things are changing so fast. We had an event with one of our large kind of employer partners, the financial services institution, and the CTO was speaking about how their company is trying to transition with AI. And the question that one of the students asked was like, how are you staying on top of everything? And his transparent response was like, I'm not, like I can't. It's hard for me to continue to keep up with all these changes. And he told the story of one of his like team members who were 3 or 4 rungs below him, who was playing around with a thing on the weekend on Cloud Code and built an agent and got it pretty functional and was able to bring it to his technology leader, and they were able to kind of begin to think about how to roll it out to the company. But the opportunity that came up for me was like, there are a number of small businesses for which like no one's gonna have time to figure out like how to build this thing that will automate a process that no one wants to do, but you can. And then you have this additional advantage of being someone who's been trained as an engineer. And so there's an opportunity there, combining that with networking to see how you can kind of begin to build your own portfolio of clients, so to speak.
Real world. I want to give you guys a little story. So just recently, I spoke with an engineer. She had never considered a CDFI, because when you think about the CDFI landscape, financial acumen, what would I do as an engineer? But from my lens, I specifically reached out to an engineer because we had an operational gap. And there was a clear operational need. And I said, okay, well, the methodology of how your brain works would work better than any person that had the financial acumen, anyone that had the social entrepreneurship acumen, because we're community advocates or we're economic developers or we're community developers. We don't have the brain to operationalize the systems that are needed to make sure that we're performing at an optimal level. Again, I will say to my peer CDFI CEOs and COOs, they don't have the capacity or the time. So what I then started to look at is, one, could I hire this particular engineer to come in and systemize our entire organization from soup to nuts, or would it be a better path to contract that individual? So thereby your entrepreneurial journey, if you were to work with 10, 15 CDFI leaders, I could hand you a list of them right now and say, okay, this young lady just came in here and completely revamped the way that we operate, making us more efficient and more effective so that we can do more of the great work with the limited capacity. You could get multiple contracts there. And, in an absence of, and again, I have a 27-year-old daughter. She is just finishing her MBA and is having a time finding a career path. And so what I gifted her for her MBA was a business plan. That was her gift. I said, here, I'm gonna teach you how to fish. Stop looking for the fish. I'm gonna teach you how to fish. So if you want more of that, that modeling or mentorship, I am here for you. Get my number before we leave here, and I'm gonna support you in this journey.
That's great. Okay, see some more hands coming up. We're gonna go to the back, middle row there, and then we'll come to the front, and then maybe all the time we have. We can come to you, sir, but I can see a few more hands first. So you got the microphone coming over, and we'll come to the front, and then we'll go from there. Thank you.
I started my career through programs like Inroads and SEO, and my pathway was investment banking. I think sort of similar to some of the stories, a Queens immigrant story, entrepreneur family, and the advice that they gave me was very relevant, right? Especially in investment banking, is work really hard, right? And that translated. But I think if I were to fast forward from like when I was an intern to today, my projection would be that investment banking world would be a lot more diverse because of programs like SEO and my presence there. And it may or may not, it might be more diverse actually ethnically, but not necessarily socioeconomically in the same way. Now, fast forward to my question, is now that I think about it, I think about like projecting out for my own kids and what the right advice, the right example is for them, right? And I think like sort of the trade skills, I think my underlying premise is ownership is everything. But if you're a trade skill and your pathway to being the owner of a HVAC business, it's harder because the HVAC business is based on AI and it's private equity folks buying that business. So you, with your tools, can't necessarily compete with that. When it comes to sort of like, so I guess my broad question is like looking at what the actual landscape of things are, even like the savings account, right? Like savings account back then, maybe could help me with a $30,000 tuition or a $5,000 tuition. Can it help me with a $200,000 tuition? Thinking about sort of like access to ownership, like access to ownership in my coffee shop, like it's impossible, like not like anecdotally, like literally impossible to own like this commercial space in New York City because you have places that have abandonment, that look abandoned, but they actually aren't because again, those investors are waiting for that train line to be extended, that whatever it is that they're waiting for. So all of that to say, hey, this is what like it actually looks like as someone who's in the field, who actually is like sort of figuring out what an MBA looking for a job today, what a train engineer is looking like, what someone with a background, and taking that as a lesson to be like, hey, what should I start to train my 6-year-old in to look at what 30 years from now looks like?
I love that question. It's so profound on like so many levels. I'm just gonna touch like a piece of it. So with one, I think that there's questions around like what is public policy happening, what kinds of ownership opportunities will there be for your 6-year-old, right? Like investment, community investment trusts or, you know, different worker owner cooperative businesses, just different frameworks that I know the city has dabbled in over the years, but I'm hoping over the next administration, how do you think about this, you know, like different versions of ownerships, different business models that I hope will come forward. I want to just reiterate the importance of assets and like the assets in someone's life as early as possible gives folks options. It doesn't solve everything. And so I understand what you're like, what is $500 going to do for a $300,000 bill? Totally get that. And the kids from different socioeconomic backgrounds, knowing that they will have that and that hopefully, you know, I shout out to Speaker Menon of the City Council, who is proposing that every kid get $1,000 in kindergarten instead of $100, and then for the kids who need it the most, get $3,000. That's going to be more than double by the time they're ready to go to CUNY. That's a lot of money supplemented by hopefully free college or hopefully your program that is I think free for the kids, right? And then education being hopefully the key to some of the next steps for folks' lives. But I'm sure my panelists would also want to respond to that.
I mean, I think you said it very well.
Yeah. And thank you, because we're all in it together.
Yes, we are.
Well, I am going to unfortunately cut this short, but I wrap up a lot of our panel discussions at the Center for an Urban Future, and I don't usually do this, but I have a couple of things to say and a couple of questions to ask. I hope you'll kind of bear with me. Also, I wish we had more time for more questions from the audience, but frankly, this panel was so fantastic that I don't think we could have cut it off any sooner. And I really mean that. I'm sitting down there in the audience, I'm thinking, man, you know what, I wouldn't mind having the same group of people up here like a year from today and like having the questions again and seeing what they said. So great job. And not only thank you for all that you said today, but thank you for the work you're all doing for communities across the city and for New York. So thank you. A big thank you to Wells Fargo for making this all possible. I wanted to say one thing. Internships have come up a couple of times, and I wanted to give a hat tip to Stephanie Arvalo from my staff, our chief of staff. About 4 or 5 years ago, we committed at the Center for an Urban Future to really taking on CUNY students for our paid internship. And I can't say that it was easy. It took Stephanie a whole lot of work, and it's continued to be a lot of work. But we've had about a third of our internships in the last 4 years being CUNY students. And I just wanted to say that, as far as the low-cost things that people could do, if you're part of a nonprofit organization, we're a nonprofit, or a small business, you could take interns from CUNY. It takes a little bit of work, but if you have that intentionality, you can make a real difference. So that's one thing. And then I have 2 questions. I'm going to put a couple people on the spot that are kind of big questions, and so I hope you'll bear with me with these questions. I'm going to get them both out. One is for Deborah Ellen. We're talking about financial security here, and you've done such amazing work with these kind of savings accounts for the youngest New Yorkers. I'm curious if you've given any thought to how we think about financial security or retirement savings for adults. We have a record number of older adults that are really also facing an affordability crisis. Many of them have worked in low-wage jobs their whole careers and haven't put money away for retirement. Is there a solution for that? But let me get out my other question, and I'll give you a minute to respond, and I know we're pretty much at the end of time. The other question is for Dr. Kim. I remember a panel we had a few years ago. We had Greg Bishop, who used to run the city's Department of Small Business Services, big fan of Greg's. And one of the things that he said that he wanted to see that I thought that always stuck with me was he wanted to see New York create thousands more black millionaires. And he actually pointed to, when we kind of pushed him, he said Atlanta, with some of the kind of small business programs, with some of the programs to support minority-owned businesses in that city, he thought New York could look there, because we've got to make sure not just that we have more black-owned businesses and minority-owned businesses, but that they grow and that they're successful. And I'm just curious, and I know we're out of time, but if there's one thing that we could do to really make sure more of our great minority-owned businesses really get to that level, so we have a lot more millionaires that are not only hiring people but putting wealth back into those communities. Anyway, those are my 2 questions, and if you all have a quick chance, that would be awesome.
So when you think about the journey in Atlanta, Georgia to Black wealth creation, it was utilizing procurement as the pathway. That's what they did. They increased the utilization. They put those guardrails that I spoke about before to make sure that the individuals or the business owners that were getting the contracts were actually minority community members and not just front-facing businesses. They also made sure that they wrapped around the services. They had access to capital. They worked with the private sector. They worked with banks to make sure that that access was equitable. And then they also made sure that the education and the technical assistance that was needed to make sure that those business owners didn't get $1 million contract that crippled them. They got $1 million contract that catapulted their generational wealth. When you think about the Rice Center, Russell, that company was built on procurement. We have it here in New York, McKissick, the black family that built America, they did so through contracting. They're still doing so through contracting with all of the dollars and the influx of opportunity through the casinos that are coming here. This is a grand opportunity for the city and for the state to really work with the private sector with these casino projects. The owners, to make sure that coming on the other side of that there are black millionaires here in New York.
Thank you.
I'm going to make more of a value statement because I spent a lot of time thinking about the kids. But this idea of this individual responsibility for savings, come on. It's just, okay, we need to have the tools so we know it's important. We don't want people to lose 20% predatory. It's a problem. But, that's this idea of the Save for College program, the scholarship accounts, these are about community accounts and, again, mutual responsibility for a city, for each other. How are we making sure that no one is left behind? And so when I'm hearing this question about retirement savings, and I'm like, it's all like, WTF, like what is any of us gonna really do here? I mean, this is a serious situation. So I would just encourage all of us to be thinking about collective solutions that prioritize products that don't leave people on their own.
Yeah, and I'll just build on that to say, absolutely, it's about the right policy and the right systems that hold like institutions accountable rather than individuals. But there is amazing policy now, the Secure Act 2.0, right, that requires most businesses, except for the very small, to actually, they are required now to offer IRAs here in New York City. It's a Roth IRA account. It's an opt-out. There are a variety of sort of bells and whistles attached to this policy. So one really exciting example is, in addition to employers now being required to support Roth IRA accounts for their employees, you can also deposit funds to reduce student loan debt pre-tax. So these sort of requirements, as well as incentives to an employer to invest in their worker financial health in these very targeted ways, are really, really critical. So what I will say is that there is good policy. It's being implemented right now in New York City around retirement, but also recognizing the connection between saving for your retirement requires you to also know that you're going to be okay with your student loan debt. You're going to be okay with liquid cash in case of emergencies. So there's now an omnibus account that enables you to also balance out retirement with emergency savings. So I will say there's some good policy underway now at the adult level that's also holding employers accountable to invest in their workers' financial health.
All right. Well, thanks. What a great note to end on. Thank you all. Thank you all for being here. Thanks for all you do, and stay tuned for the next Center for an Urban Future event. Take care.